We are going to do the Bible study that we should be finished with week 1 by now. So I'm going to wait till a few people join and then we're going to start. Just waiting for a few people to join. If you're watching this after the live ends, just know that at first I always kind of wait for a little bit, wait till a few people join, and then I start reading. So if you're watching this after the live ends, just skip through me sitting here. Hello. Hi. It's good to see you guys. I'm just waiting for a few more people to join, and then we're going to do a little, some of the questions and stuff I was talking about last live. I did a live last week, and I read Genesis 1 through 4, and then I posted that I would, this week, every Monday at 6:30, I will be doing a week Bible study. I'll be going over questions and stuff. I have my book here for the Bible study. And I'm going to start in just a second. Hi. I'm good. How are you? So, for those of you that weren't here last week when I did my live, I have a book that I go by, and I go through every week on live like this on Monday, and I read to you it goes through the Bible in a whole year. So I'm going to do a live every Monday and get through this book with you guys. So if you weren't here last week, I posted here and on TikTok that I'd be reading Genesis. So this whole week I had a plan, and we had read Genesis 1 through 4 all the way up to Genesis 1 through 21. That was last week's. And then today I'm going to read in the book about it, about this week 1. This is only week 1, so if you're just joining, if you're just starting, don't worry, you still have plenty of time to join and to do this Bible study. And then I would recommend getting a journal out to journal in, because I have some questions I'm going to ask you guys about what you read this week, and kind of just summarize what we read today. If you guys have any questions or comments or anything, just leave them in the comment section. But I think we're going to start. Are you guys ready to start? For me to start reading? Alright, I'm going to start. So, today, this last Monday, like I said, we read Genesis 1 through 4, and then all of that week was reading. I had a plan on my TikTok and YouTube, a video showing you guys what to read for that week, and it went through Genesis 1 through 21. And you guys can always go back and watch this too once the live ends, and it'll be a video on my YouTube. So, I'm going to read. This is the book, by the way, that is the Bible study. The Bible in 52 Weeks. A year-long Bible study. I'm going to start reading hold on, give me just a second. Oh. Okay, I'm going to start reading what it says in the book. So right here in the book, we have week 1, and then over here we have it kind of summarizing, I think, just like what everything said and what we read during the week. So, my purpose, this is from the author. My purpose is to encourage the encourager today. While you focus on the needs of those around you, remember that God has not forgotten about you. He hears your prayers and remembers your heart's desires and struggles. He posed a question to Abraham in Genesis 18:14. Is anything too hard for the Lord? And the answer is that there is absolutely nothing too hard for God. Ephesians 3:20 says that God is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that works in us. There is nothing you could think or ask that God cannot do. In the story of Sarah and Abraham, God told Abraham that he would make him a great nation, and from him all the families of the earth would be blessed. This promise probably didn't make sense to Abraham at the time, because he and Sarah had no children, and well into their senior years they thought they were too old. In chapter 16, Sarah still hadn't had a child yet, so she took matters into her own hands and decided that Abraham should sleep with her maid, Hagar. Abraham and Hagar had a son named Ishmael. I don't know if I got that right. God allowed it, but he did not ordain it. You must be mindful that when it comes to the promises of God, you shouldn't take matters into your own hands. In chapter 18, God made Abraham and Sarah a specific promise, one that didn't make sense. The odds were against them because of their age. Abraham was 100 and Sarah was 90 years old. By this time, it had been 13 years since God made his original promise in chapter 12, and they had seen no signs of their earlier promise. What do you do when you've waited so long and somebody is telling you that the impossible is still possible? What do you do when the promise just doesn't make sense? You've got to decide in your heart not to give in to the doubt. I know that's easier said than done. I've had to learn the hard way that doubting hinders the progress to your promise, paralyzes you, and keeps you stagnant. It makes you want to take control rather than trust God with your life. However, when you replace doubt with faith, you give God something to work with. It's easy to be skeptical, but when the odds are against you, but I encourage you to trust God to keep his word. When you replace doubt with faith, trust that God will do his part and release the blessing. You have to believe that there is absolutely nothing too hard for God to do. I love that because it was talking about a lot in those chapters that I just said. Week 1 were the readings. It was talking a lot about Sarah and Abraham and how God blessed them with a child, but how they had to wait for God's timing and God's promise. And they had to believe that there was nothing too hard for God to do. So if you guys want to pull out your journals or whatever you want to write in, I have some questions, some points to ponder, some things to think about, write down, and just good things for you to think about actually with your walk with God, and how Abraham and Sarah had to trust God in how Abraham and Sarah had to trust God in this time of such doubt, especially because they were so old that they thought that there was no way that they would be able to have children. It even said this when, I'm pretty sure, I don't remember exactly the verses, but that when God said that they would have a child, Sarah laughed because she didn't believe that that was possible for her and Abraham. And that's why she took matters into her own hands. But this is a good lesson for us to try and to trust God, even though it seems impossible to us, because God can do the impossible. And that's what faith is, believing that God can do the impossible no matter what, that He will do for you what you don't even believe that can be done. So are you guys ready? I'm going to read the questions now if you guys are ready. Hi, sorry. You guys ready for me to read the questions? Okay, I'm going to read the first question, okay? When you were faced with an impossibility, how did you handle it? After this lesson, how will you handle those impossibilities going forward? You guys can put your answers in the chat too if you want. Discuss among yourselves. I'm going to repeat it. When you were faced with an impossibility, how did you handle it? After this lesson, how will you handle those impossibilities going forward? Does everyone have that question done? When you were faced with impossibility, how did you handle it? After this lesson, how will you handle those impossibilities going forward? Because I think Sarah and Abraham, we can relate to them in having to wait on God's promises, but also believing God in the impossible. But like the question asks, how were you faced with an impossibility? Most of the times we probably act like Sarah and Abraham, and it's kind of hard for us to believe because it seems impossible. Actually, the Bible says that with men things are impossible, with God all things are possible. With God all things are possible. So after knowing and learning about Sarah and Abraham and how Sarah even laughed after God had told them this promise for them, this what seemed like an impossibility, how are you going to have faith in God in that? You got to have faith in God that he can do the impossible for you. And we can learn from them how to have faith in God during the impossible. Okay, I'm going to read question 2 now. What has this lesson taught you about your faith? For me, I know it's that God can do the impossible. To have faith not only when we see things or when we know things are going to happen, but even when it seems so crazy and it seems impossible and we don't understand, to have that kind of faith in those times. So, what has this lesson taught you about your faith? What has this lesson taught you about your faith? Reading about Sarah and Abraham, how they had to believe God when things seemed impossible. How can you relate to that, and what does it teach you about your faith? What does it teach you and tell you about having that kind of faith like Abraham had? Okay, question 3. What areas have you discovered where you are strong in faith? What areas have you discovered where your faith needs to be strengthened? So, what areas have you discovered where you are strong in faith? And what areas have you discovered where your faith needs to be strengthened? For me, I feel like I am strong in faith when God calls me to teach others and to talk in front of people. I think I get kind of nervous before I do it, but when I'm doing it, I feel bold and I feel like he just lights a fire in me. So I feel strong in faith when he's calling me to that. But I think we all need our faith strengthened in a way to not doubt, especially to not doubt God in the impossible, in the things that he promises, and to know that he is bigger than everything that the world is saying is impossible. And he can make anything happen, anything. Okay, question 4. After this lesson, what are some impossibilities that you will commit to prayer? After this lesson, what are some impossibilities that you will commit to prayer? Do you have anything that feels like it's impossible in your life that you need to surrender to God and that you need to bring in prayer, that you need to commit to prayer, that you need to just surrender to God and give it to him, lay it at his feet so that He can take care of it. If God tells you He's going to do something for you, if He makes you a promise, He's not going to break that. God never changes. He is the same always. And He has never failed anyone, and He's not going to start with you. So if God tells you that He's going to do something that looks impossible to you, we need to have strong faith in knowing that He is going to do that, because He's done it in the past. He's done it for other people. He will do it for you. And if He said He's going to do it, He will not change His mind, because God cannot change, and He is going to follow through on what He promises you. But it's all in His perfect timing and His perfect will. Okay, now here are some actions for the week, okay? 1. Decide in your heart to think and speak positively, replacing negative words with positive ones, okay? So this week, start doing that. Decide in your heart to think and speak positively, replacing negative words with positive ones. So when you have negative thoughts, when you just feel negative, when you have doubt, fear, whatever it is, replace it with positive thoughts. Okay, now number 2, make a commitment to yourself to intentionally respond to your doubts with declarations of faith. So respond to your doubts. When you have doubts, respond to those with declarations of faith. If you have doubt telling you that God's not able to come through, God can't do that for you, tell that thought, replace it with faith, and tell them, my God is bigger than that, and my God can do that. I have faith that my God can do the impossible, that He can do anything. Number 3, at the end of the week, note how speaking positively into your life has begun to have a good impact on your outlook and ability to trust God. So follow these 2 things this week, okay? Start replacing negativity with positivity, okay? And replace doubt with faith. So when you start to have thoughts of doubt, replace them with declarations of faith. And then at the end of this week, by the time we do our next live, know and tell me how you spoke positively into your life and how that has affected you and impacted your life. So do those 2 things, and by this time next week, next Monday at 6:30, tell me in the chat how speaking positively and replacing doubt with declarations of faith changed your life, how it impacted your life, and how it changed your outlook and ability to trust God. Okay, so that's all the questions, the actions for this week, okay? Do those things this week, and by this time next week, tell me how it impacted you and it changed your outlook on how to have better faith and have better trust in God. Tell me how Sarah and the circumstances of Sarah and Abraham had an impact on you. Did they have an impact on you? Did it make you change the way you think about your faith, the way you think about God? So that is the end for this week's. Tomorrow will be the start of week 2. And again, on my TikTok and here on YouTube, I'll post a video telling everybody what to read for this whole week. This is going to be week 2. And then again, we'll go this time at 6:30 every Monday. But this time next week, we will go over the questions for week 2 and talk through. And if you guys have any questions or anything about this week's readings or what we just talked about, just type them down below and I will try and help you as much as I can. Okay. I'm going to ask like last week if there's any verses anyone wants me to read before I get off, or if there's any questions anyone has, or if there's anything anyone wants to say. Does anyone have any questions about Sarah and Abraham and how we have to trust God in what seems impossible to us? Does anyone have any questions or comments on Sarah and Abraham, or what we read this week, or any verses they would like to share that I can read? No questions or anything? Nobody? Okay, I'm going to read this part. This was some of the scripture that we had from this week's readings. I want to read this part. Genesis 15, starting in verse 5, it says, "And the Lord took Abraham outside and said to him, 'Look up into the sky and count the stars, if you can. That's how many descendants you will have.' And Abraham believed the Lord, and the Lord counted him as righteous because of his faith." The Lord counted Abraham as righteous because of his faith. So that seemed impossible, that God promised them a child. But he told Abraham to look up into the sky and count the stars. And he says, that's how many descendants you will have. That might have been kind of hard for Abraham to believe. But Abraham believed God could do the impossible, that God could do something that seemed impossible to them. And because he believed, the Lord counted him as righteous. So guys, just what we can take away from Abraham and Sarah, that they believed in God, even though something seemed impossible to them, they believed in God even though this seemed impossible. Abraham believed and God counted him as righteous. So guys, no matter how impossible something may seem to you, yes, Sarah was old and could not have children, yes. So it was probably kind of hard for her to believe when God promised them a child. So whatever it might seem impossible for you today, just know that God can do the impossible. God can do anything. With all things are possible for God. With God, all things are possible. So I encourage you to have faith like Abraham did and believe in God no matter what the circumstances, no matter what it is that might seem impossible. Because God will count you as righteous because of your faith. That is true faith when we can't see something, it's hard for us to believe, and yet we still have faith that God can do it because we trust in Him. We surrender to Him. Okay, so tomorrow I will post what each day the daily readings for you guys to read for next week 2, okay? It'll look like this. I don't know if you guys can see that well, but it says day 1, day 2, day 3, all of that. And it tells you what to read on those days. And you guys read that next week. I'll post the video on my TikTok and here on YouTube. I'll post those, and you guys read those, and this time next week, Mondays at 6:30, we will do another live just like this one. We'll go through the questions. Each week has questions. Each week has the kind of summarizing about what the week's readings were, and then we'll kind of talk like this. We can talk in the chat if you guys have questions or verses you want to share, anything like that, okay? Okay. If everyone's good then, no questions or verses or anything, I'm going to get off here and we'll meet again next Monday, 6:30, okay, guys? You have a good night, too. I'll see you next Monday. Okay. Bye, everyone. Thank you. I'll see you next Monday.